Are they on? Oh, good.
I am Joseph Addison. And this is a little note I wrote in the tap clock from my own apartment. October 31st, 1709. I was this morning awakened by a sudden shake of the house. And as soon as I got a little out of my consternation, I felt another, which was followed by 2 or 3 repetitions of the same convulsion. I got up as fast as possible, girt on my rapier, and snatched up my hand when my landlady came up to me and told me that the gentleman of the next house begged me to step thither, for that a lodger she had taken in was run mad, and she desired my advice, as indeed everybody in the whole lane does upon important occasions. I am not, like some artists, saucy, because I can be beneficial, but went immediately. Our neighbour told us she had, the day before, let her second floor to a very genteel youngish man, who told her he kept extraordinary good hours and was generally at home for most part of the morning and evening at study, but that this morning he had for an hour together made this extravagant noise, which we then heard. I went upstairs with my hand upon the hilt of my rapier and approached this new lodger's door. I looked in at the keyhole, and there I saw a well-made man look with great attention upon a book, and on a sudden jump into the air so high that his head almost touched the ceiling. He came down safe on his right foot, and then again flew up, alighting on his left. Then looked again at his book, and holding out his right leg, put it into such a quivering motion that I thought he would have shaken it off. He used the left after the same manner, when, on a sudden, to my great surprise, he stooped himself incredibly low and turned gently on his toes. After this circular motion, he continued bent in that humble posture for some time, looking at his book. After this, he recovered himself with a sudden spring and flew around the room in all violence and disorder imaginable, till he made a full pause for want of breath. In this interim, my woman asked what I thought. I whispered that I thought this learned person an enthusiast, who possibly had his first education in the peripatetic way, which was a sect of philosophers who always studied when walking. But observing him much out of breath, I thought it best time to master him if he were disordered, and knocked upon his door. I was surprised to find him open it, and say with great civility and good mien that he hoped he had not disturbed us. I believed him in a lucid interval, and desired he would please to let me see his book. He did so, smiling. I could not make anything of it, and asked what language it was writ. He said it was one he studied with great application, but it was his profession to teach it, and could not communicate his knowledge without a consideration. I answered that I hoped he would therefore keep his thoughts to himself, for his meditation this morning had cost me 3 coffee dishes and a clean pipe. He seemed concerned that, and told me, he was a dancing master and had been reading a dance or two before he went out, which had been written by one who taught at an academy in France. He observed me at a stand and went on to inform me that now articulate motions as well as sounds were expressed by proper characters, and that there is nothing so common as to communicate a dance by letter. I beseech him therefore to meditate in a ground room, for that otherwise it would be impossible for an artist of any other kind to live near him, and that I was sure several of his thoughts this morning would have shaken my spectacles off my nose, had I been myself at study. I took my leave of this virtuoso and returned to my chamber, meditating on the various occupations of rational creatures. Well, that is Joseph Addison. And now I present to you, ladies and gentlemen, Pantalone Studies Dance Notation. It is dedicated to all those struggling to read dance notation.
So the music is Le Carré de la Danse, written in 1715 by Rebel, Jean-Ferry Rebel. And all the ballerinas of the time choreographed it, either solo themselves or a duo with a dancing partner, another man. And I have done 2 versions myself as a solo, but I really wanted to do one with Bill. And for a couple of months we've been trying to get time to put it together, but in the end it was 1 week. So didn't have much time. So it was very easy doing the first part, and I was just sort of making things up to the music. And then of course we borrowed the the sleep sequence from last year's. But then this music comes on, the symphony, that comes on twice. And whereas most of it is, in 8.5 minutes, there's about a dozen or 14 different Baroque dance rhythms, so you can dance to all the different rhythms. But then there's these 2 symphonies, which are clearly very Italianized. So you probably, you can dance to it, and I have danced to that, but it doesn't feel very comfortable, really, because it's so theatrical. So we thought, well, what on earth can we do? And in the last show I did, which I choreographed myself, it was a masquerade ball, and I came on and I fell in love with someone. And in the first symphony, I sort of got off with him, and then in this lovely slow musette, I'm rejected by him, and I throw away his flower, etc. And in the last section, I'm just very distressed, and I end up poisoning myself. So I said to Bill, well, the only thing we can do is something like what I did in my solo. And so we thought then that it would express the fact that the notation only goes so far, and it doesn't really express a lot of mime and theatricality, and I guess that's why later in the 18th century it fell out of use. But then we thought of a much simpler solution, which is that I see Bill slumped in his chair asleep, but I think he's dead, and so it somehow morphs into Romeo and Juliet.
The other interesting thing is Matthew's recitation. It comes from the Tatler of, I think it was 1709, and it's Joseph Addison. And the interesting thing about the Tatler in that period, it was a very popular magazine, and there are numerous advertisements for the publications. At 1709, I'm not quite sure, it's not Tomlinson, he's a little bit later. It might be Weaver. One of them had done a sort of an English version of Fourier, and Fourier, of course, invented the notation. Pécourt produced the dancers. So these were beginning to appear in England around that time, early 18th century. So it kind of made sense for Pantalone to be trying to learn to dance hopelessly from the notation in order to impress the ladies, because that's what the chaps were doing at that time. To be able to impress them, you had to know how to dance. Dancing, ordinary dancers, was not enough. You had these fancy figured French dancers is what you were really aiming for.
Well, you're thinking of what we were talking about last night, when the knights had to learn to dance to impress the ladies.
Well, it's always been the case, you know. This chaps can dance, and no hope for the ladies. Anyway, so Matthew's piece, which we're very grateful for that recitation. It is Joseph Addison writing a little comic piece, probably made up, I don't imagine that actually happened for real, about the dancing master who is studying the notation that had just come over from France, or possibly it was an English translation version. Anyway, that's what we got. There's some refreshments, water and such like there, and we'll rejoin the program with Tim and the others in a few minutes, 10 minutes. Right.